I want to talk to you about two specific vertebrae that we find in the cervical spine that are highly specialized for what they do. And these are kind of unusual looking vertebrae. This is C1, which is going to be your first cervical vertebrae, otherwise known as atlas. This one is C2. It's got this bony prominence here sticking up, and this is called axis. Okay, so these are special and they do some special things. So let's take a look at C1 first. You can see C1, it kind of looks, let's get this guy out of the way, it kind of looks like just a big ring, right? It doesn't have a vertebral body, so that's kind of unusual. It's got this little like anterior arch with this little process here, but no specific vertebral body. It also doesn't have a spinous process. So it makes it a little bit unusual. So it's basically just like a big ring, and you see these superior articular facets here. Well, that's going to articulate with the underside of the skull. So if we look here on the occipital bone, on either side of foramen magnum, which is where the spinal cord is going to travel out from the brainstem as we move from skull down into the vertebral column, you can see these kind of bony prominences here and here on either side. Well, these are convex, okay? They're convex surfaces. And if we look at our vertebrae here, these are concave surfaces. And so they're gonna fit together really nicely on top of each other, just like this. And so this is how our skull is gonna sit on top of our vertebral column. And now what happens, this forms a joint, and this gives us this type of motion for our skull. So when you nod your head yes, this motion is occurring at the occiput C1 joint. Okay. So if we look at C2, it's got some interesting things too. So C2 is kind of unusual. It's got this bony prominence here in the front, and this is basically it's called the odontoid process, or the dens, and it does have a spinous process. So it's got kind of a little spinous process, and it's kind of interesting too. The spinous process is kind of like split into two pieces. That's called a bifid spinous process, and that's kind of specific to the cervical vertebrae. So cervical vertebrae typically have those bifid spinous processes. But what happens is this post here is going to fit perfectly against the anterior tubercle of the atlas, and you've got a little ligament that's actually going to run across here, and it's going to hold that odontoid process against the anterior arch of the atlas, and it creates a pivot joint. So it's basically going to spin like this. It's going to pivot. Okay? Now, this gives us no. So when you shake your head no from side to side, that motion is happening at C1, C2. And it's a result of that odontoid process forming a joint against the anterior arch of the